Just 24 hours ago, Northern Ireland was celebrating golfing success. But last night it was back to the worst of times as up to 500 people took to the streets involved in full-scale rioting. At one stage, gangs of young men fought hand to hand.
Police say the UVF orchestrated the violence going into the nationalist Short Strand area of East Belfast. The trouble escalated with petrol bombs and blast bombs hurled. And then the guns were brought back out with shots fired from both sides and 2 men being rushed to hospital with gunshot wounds. Sharon O'Neill reports.
The sound of gunfire in the early hours of this morning. It was amid scenes of some of the worst rioting East Belfast has seen for years. Tensions have been simmering for weeks between the two communities and they exploded last night. What we know so far is that at around 9 o'clock last night, up to 100 mass loyalists, armed and many wearing surgical gloves, attacked Catholic homes in the Short Strand area.
Heard thuds, seen the bricks coming up my windows, looked out the living room window and there was umpteen masked men kicking at my car, screaming, "Come on, you fiend bee." It was like a film. There was that many of them. They were like ants just coming from everywhere.
Before long, there was hand-to-hand fighting, stone throwing, followed by petrol bombs and eventually live gunfire from both sides.
I've spoken to PSNI senior officers tonight and I'm satisfied and I'm making this call. The UVF were involved in attacking the Catholic people in Strand tonight, and I think it's absolutely shameful in this day and age that this community has to put up with this yet again.
In excess of 10 petrol bombs coming from the grounds of St Matthew's Roman Catholic Church over the top of the police Land Rovers and into the houses that were rendered defenceless because the people who lived in them were penned in the back by the actions of the way the police had chosen to police this.
We believe at this point that members of East Belfast UVF were involved. It will be a line of investigation to establish whether that was a coordinated and organisational position, but at this point we're satisfied that at the very least members of East Belfast UVF were involved in organising the disorder last night.
Police have confirmed that shots were fired by both sides and that 2 young men from the loyalist side of the interface were treated in hospital for gunshot wounds. On the nationalist side, a Catholic man needed hospital treatment when a block was dropped on his head. His brother didn't want to appear on camera.
He was hit on the head with what they say was maybe a quarter of a concrete block, which knocked him unconscious and now left him in hospital with a fractured skull.
But both sides suffered in a night which saw people forced to seek refuge with friends and family.
I have 3 young kids in the house and they couldn't have stayed there, but I couldn't have got out any earlier because of the stones and bricks and bottles, everything that was getting thrown over at us. And I just had to wait until there was sort of a wee bit of calm, and I just had to get the kids, lift them out of bed in their pyjamas and run to my sister's car and go to my mum's to stay.
No way to live?
No, definitely not. It's definitely not with kids. I have a 7-year-old son who has Asperger's, so his wee mind, at the minute, he just doesn't know where he is.
Within the last hour, the First and Deputy First Minister met the Chief Constable, a clear sign of how serious this violence is being viewed. Sharon O'Neill, UTV Live.
Well, today, families on both sides were left to pick up the pieces of last night's violence. Tracy McGee has been talking to some of them.
It's a scene no one wants to see in post-conflict Northern Ireland. Children helping to clear away the rubble left by rioters. In the early hours of this morning, this little girl's mother had to get her and her 11-year-old brother out of their home on the Protestant side of the interface because they were so frightened.
There was bricks being fired over that way. My windows got up. I had to get the kids out of the house because they were squealing and being sick. They were up the stairs in the bedrooms, and as you can see, that's one of the bedrooms, and they were in there and I had to get them completely out of the house, round to my friend's house.
Last night's violence, the most serious seen in East Belfast in years, was a throwback to dark days most people want to forget. On the Catholic side of the Newtonards Road, the damage is just as bad. These houses on Strand Walk were pelted with stones and bottles. One man says his mother was watching television in her living room when her home came under attack.
She saw a few men still had masks on, and the next minute she heard a thud, and she thought it was a gunshot or something, and it actually hit the window there and broke on the first 2 panes of the glass, because it's blast-proof glass anyway, so she was lucky, you know. The brick bounced off the window, and then the next minute there was just a barrage of bricks, bottles and whatever else.
This is an area that has seen its fair share of violence in the past, but residents say things had largely settled down in recent years. But the intensity of last night's violence took most people by surprise.
I've never seen it this bad, to be honest. I've lived here for 22 years, and it's unreal. Like, that top window was my bedroom window, and I used to hear it every Sunday night getting hit with bricks, and that's stopped now for a good 7 or 8 years, and now it's just, this is probably the worst I've ever seen it.
Earlier in the evening, homes on the other side of Short Strand were attacked by men wearing combat jackets and masks. Houses on the Albert Bridge Road were attacked with paint bombs.
I looked out the window and there was nothing but fellas, like, with black masks, balaclavas, and like black jackets and all on. And there was quite a whole lot of them, like, they were all on the middle of the road and everything. It's just like the troubles all coming and hitting you up the face again, you know, that frightening experience.
The clean-up is well underway here today, but broken bottles and stones are relatively easy to brush away. The damage to community relations, however, will take a lot longer to heal. Tracy McGee, UTV Live, East Belfast.
Well, it's been described as the most serious violence witnessed in Northern Ireland for decades. Jane Loughrey has been looking at why it may have erupted in East Belfast last night.
These freshly painted murals on the Lower Newtonards Road, replacing murals of Glentoran Football Club, have been interpreted as the paramilitary group reinforcing its presence in the area. The police say the UVF, who are meant to be in ceasefire, organised last night's rioting. A local community worker and PUP member says there have been growing frustrations in the loyalist community.
Loyalism at the minute feel unrepresented. They need representation. They need people to listen to them. And if I don't listen, I'm not saying that I know everything and I'm Mr. Smart, but if I don't listen to concerns within my communities, things like what happened there last night are going to continue to happen. Loyalism feels outside the process, and do you know why? Because we've been pushed outside the process. Nobody is trying to bring us in out of the cold. We were part and parcel of what's happening up in Stormont. But you know something? It's like still a cold house for loyalism. No one seems to want to help the communities that I come from, and this, to me, is as a result of it.
Numerous sectarian attacks on St Matthew's Catholic Church and on Protestant homes in Susan Street have escalated the tension.
It's been building up over several months. There are minor infringements most nights, if not every other night, against houses, probably on both sides, but the ones I know about would be in Susan Street, just behind you here.
Police say the UVF went in and the UVF started the trouble in the Short Strand last night.
I don't know who started the trouble last night. All I'm saying, there's a context. I don't believe either community attacked the other one simply because they were loyalist or because they're Republican. I think there was a context to it, and the context was it's been building up and simmering for several months.
Adding to the discontent was the seizure of a bar by the Serious Organised Crime Agency in April, which was regularly used by loyalists. An academic at Queen's University believes there is some internal friction within loyalism.
Well, any orchestration of any violence, any planning of any violence tells us that quite clearly there are people who are breaking from their leadership. Their leaderships are quite clearly have told them that they're in ceasefire, their leadership have told them that the conflict is over, and in this case we probably have elements within who've decided that that's not the case, that they have to flex their prowess, flex their muscles, make themselves important, maintain their role within society. And you know, today you'll have people in the loyalist community who will simply be hanging their heads in shame and saying this is not what we encourage and this is not what we promote.
Tension remains high here on the Lower Newtonards Road. Community workers say it's been building for months, and they now want loyalist leaders and politicians to sit down with them and try and defuse the situation. Jane Loughrey, UTV Live, East Belfast.
I'm joined in the studio by the MP for East Belfast, Naomi Long. Naomi Long, I know that you weren't on the streets last night, but what has underlined last night's trouble?
Well, I think first and foremost, and the most important thing to take away from all this, is that if people do have grievances, if people have issues and concerns, the way to handle them is not by this kind of violent behaviour on the streets. That makes it impossible for people to really make any progress. It destroys local communities, and as we saw very clearly by what you have played this evening in terms of the tapes of today, it is destroying local families and putting them under really intolerable pressure. People need to realise that violence is not the answer. The question is not one that's being asked, and that's where we need to get to, where we can actually deal with the question.
Well, you're the MP for East Belfast. Loyalists who we've interviewed there say they feel disenfranchised. Is that true?
Well, I can't speak for loyalism because I didn't stand for loyalism when I stood for election. I stood for a peaceful future. I stood to represent people on both sides of the interface. But I'm willing to work with people and have been working with people on both sides of the interface. But what we need to do is accept a few basic principles, the rule of law being fundamental to that. We need to respect people's right to a dignified existence in peace and quiet in their own homes, and nothing and no amount of frustration with politics, with delivery in local communities can ever excuse or be used to excuse the kind of violence that we saw last night.
Did last night surprise you?
Last night surprised me in terms of the intensity and the ferocity of the trouble, but there have, as others have said, been simmerings below the surface for quite some time. We have spoken with the police about this on numerous occasions, and we have talked to others in the community about it, and we're aware that there are tensions there. I am confident that the police are aware of the situation and are doing their best to police what is a very difficult situation. But the people who suffer most in all of this are the people who live in that community. I grew up in inner East Belfast. I grew up on the Newtownards Road. The backdrop to my growing up was this consistent threat of terror and violence. I want a new generation of young people to have better prospects.
But in view of what you saw last night, have we moved on?
Well, I believe we can move on. I think a lot of damage has been done to the good work that has been put in by people on all sides. On the Loyalists, the Republican sides, those who are not in either, have worked really hard around the interface to try and bring stability. I don't want to see that hard work destroyed. I want to see us move forward and give young people in that community an opportunity.
Naomi Long, thank you very much. Thank you.
And you can find comprehensive video coverage of last night's violence on our website, where you can also leave your comments. That's u.tv/news.